$1,000 in student loans, as all student debt will be eliminated. Like CUNY was in the past, all of you from New York know that CUNY was free at one point, and just like CUNY, all schooling will be free under socialism in the US. Yay. Okay, number 3. My partner, who is a transgender man, won't have to jump through a billion hoops when it comes to getting trans-sensitive health insurance or applying for student loans. Now, most people don't know this, but every year when he goes to apply for student loans, they make him pull out all this documentation because they say he didn't register for the selective service for the military draft when he was 18, which of course he didn't have to because he's transgender, so he didn't have to when he was 18. So, and as I was saying before, student loans won't exist under socialism and the military draft won't exist, but yeah, he won't have to jump through these hoops. As institutionalized discrimination against LGBTQ people is done away with, I'll have to worry less and less about my friends getting beat up by bigots on the streets. Miles, oh, okay, so, sorry, that was out of place. So the other thing is that there would be trans-sensitive health care. Miles, my partner, he got in just under the wire before the state of New York mandated that Medicaid would no longer provide for gender reassignment surgery. And under socialism, and this actually happens in Cuba and in other socialist countries, those surgeries, along with hormones and all other trans-specific health care needs, would be free. Okay, that's 3, this is 4. Billboards would no longer market everything under the sun, from soda and beer to automobiles, by selling them in relation to sexualized women's bodies. In fact, that was one of the first things that struck me every single time I've been to Cuba, and other folks can testify to this. But you know, the billboards in Cuba, they have these revolutionary slogans. It's not these like misogynist advertisements that, you know, in the US we're subjected to so much that half the time we don't even notice them because it's just so overwhelming. If you haven't experienced it, you have no, I'm not even joking, you have no idea what a liberating feeling it is to be in a place where you're not constantly reminded that as a woman you're considered an object or the property of others in society. So that will be here. Number 5, right? My mother, who spent the last 4 years in prison after allegedly forging a check to avoid getting evicted from her apartment, would never have had to avoid eviction in the first place, since housing will be guaranteed in a country that has so many vacant buildings right now. Prisons would be reserved for the capitalists who have committed genocide around the world and those who have committed serious antisocial crimes, not people trying to get by and survive, and not for political prisoners as it is now. Fresh, healthy produce would be available for everyone in this country, in this land of abundance. This sounds kind of flip, but it's very true. I was actually telling Deirdre the other day that I didn't taste lettuce until I was 17 years old, because where I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, fresh produce didn't really exist. And meanwhile, there were fast food chains and liquor stores on every corner. So we would remove that so that in communities of color, in poor communities everywhere, you know, produce would be available, healthy food and things would be available. Lastly, I just put on, I don't have a big thing for this, but I put on here, we finally deal with global warming in a real way. We finally deal with cancer and all the other health problems that plague us without the pharmaceuticals doing research only to produce more drugs to sell to people. All of these things are possible under socialism, and they will happen when we win socialism in the U.S. That's just a few things I could think of off the top of my head of how socialism in the U.S. would personally affect me. I'm sure you can all obviously think about how socialism in the U.S. would affect you and the people you love and the people you interact with in the world. But in order for socialism to be permanently established on the globe, the struggle has to be won in the citadels of world capitalism, and particularly right here in the U.S. So even more importantly, to talk about what socialism will look like in the U.S. is to talk about what socialism will look like around the world. When Occupy Wall Street began happening, messages of solidarity from around the world came flooding in. And what a lot of folks from these countries, both from countries oppressed by imperialism and by oppressed workers in the imperialist countries themselves, what a lot of these folks were saying was finally, what took you so long? All the evils of capitalist society, war and military occupation, racism and repression, the oppression of women and LGBTQ people, the destruction of the environment, they're all deeply connected by one common thread. They each are fomented to serve the profit interests of an insatiable capitalist ruling class. Profits drive capitalism to expand around the globe, and it also drives it to overproduce and implode into crisis, such as what we're seeing right now. And as Lenin said, as I mentioned earlier, we know that the shell of imperialism and capitalism will inevitably be removed. But we also know, we're very clear about, is that it's going to take the movement of people on the streets, building unity and solidarity and fight back, and seeing their own revolutionary potential that is going to make that happen. And that's one of the things that makes these occupation movements. Thank you, I'm almost done. That's one of the things that makes the occupation movements, Occupy Wall Street and the occupations in the cities around the country, that's what makes them so important. They show that solidarity and cooperation is possible. The occupations are getting people to act and to think more independently of the system and independently of all the organizations that tie them to the system, and that's great. So, a rising tide lifts all boats. Socialism in the U.S. will mean a breath of fresh air for Cuba, for all the countries that are oppressed by U.S. imperialism, and it will be a boom to revolutionary movements everywhere. Socialism in the U.S. will seriously and decidedly mean the victory of the worldwide socialist revolution, and I have absolutely no doubt about that. And so that's why it's so essential for us to keep fighting for it. Thank you.